So President Donald Trump has announced a 90-day pause on the tariffs for everyone across the world except for China and replaced the tariff for everybody else with a 10% tariff. China is now at 125%. The markets cheered it yesterday, but as the markets have opened now, they've started to fall. In this video, we're going to talk about whether this pause of 90 days is enough to save the USA from recession, what the impact will be on the world when the two biggest economies, which is US and China, go at each other in a trade war, and what the impact will be on India. Remember, like, share, subscribe and sign up for our membership. Let's first take a look at what happened in the stock market. So yesterday, after Trump actually posted it on social media that he's decided on a 90-day pause, with very little explanation, the stock market actually did a full thumbs up in the US. The stock market has not been open in India because of a holiday, but in the US, the S&P 500 went up 10%, after which, the Japanese stocks went up 9%. The European stocks had their best day since 2020. But this morning, as Wall Street has just opened, and what is Thursday night for us, the indices have fallen actually. So we'll take a look at what that looks like. The Dow Jones is down 1.7%. It's lost about 700 points. The S&P 500 is down 2.2%. The Nasdaq is down 2.6%. So even now, after yesterday's run-up, these indices are lower than where they were before the reciprocal tariffs were announced. So effectively, they've not regained the ground that has been lost in the last 1 week, and there is a view that the volatility is not over. For example, Reuters quotes a portfolio manager from Singapore, from Janice Henderson in Singapore, who says the volatility is not over, the environment remains uncertain, and some impacts are irreversible. We have to get used to this back and forth, he says, and this is a space for traders and not investors. UBS Global Wealth Management CIO has actually said the market rebound was an opportunity to position for a likely volatile period. So they're expecting a volatile period, and given the escalation of trade tensions between US and China, they expect the volatility to continue. Now let's take a look at why Trump did the pause, right? He's spoken at the White House and he's basically said it had to be done because some people were getting yippy. This is his vocabulary. Like I said, we're going to have to get used to it. He said, I did the 90-day pause for people who did not retaliate because I told them if you retaliate, we'll double it. And that's what China did. And he said, and I'm quoting here, it's all going to work out amazing. And there are some theories of why he actually did the pause. And these are one of those theories is, as Fitch Ratings has told CNN, that if he had gone through with those reciprocal tariffs across the world, it would have likely resulted in higher inflation and weaker economic growth for the US. The other problem was that within his own Treasury Department, there was alarm about the developments in the bond market, and that put a lot of pressure on Trump itself. The US Treasury Secretary had raised concerns that basically there was a massive sell-off happening in the Treasury market as well, and that was not good. So these are actually the real reasons that basically would have caused a recession in the US, and there was a massive sell-off among US Treasury bonds, which are basically their government bonds, and that was causing a lot of nervousness in their Treasury Department, and that's possibly why he called the pause. Although he's not obviously going to claim that. Now, why have they singled out China? Because there's a tit for tat happening at China. Remember, US started with 34% on China. China did a reciprocal tax. That then escalated. So currently the final numbers as they stand, China has 84% on US. US has 125% on China. And that is where both those countries are standing right now as they do this who blinks first sort of Texas draw exercise between the two of them. And there's a lot of geopolitics obviously in the background of all of this. Caroline Leavitt, who is the White House press secretary, the woman who's actually briefing the press on what Trump is doing, she said, and I quote, "If you punch the United States of America, President Trump is going to punch back harder." And that's where they have left that. So the back and forth over tariffs has shaken the confidence, from what we understand, of the US leadership, and exposed also fractures within Trump's own team, and rattled companies that rely on global sources for products and international customers for sale. And so Americans who use the stock market to save for their retirement and their college are suffering a lot of angst. Basically, what is happening is within Trump's own government, it's exposed the fact that there are several people who don't agree with what he's doing. There are several people, important people, who don't understand or are not being briefed on what he's doing. For example, their trade representative was briefing Congress while Trump announced this 90-day pause, and he did not betray any idea that he knew that this was going to happen. So it does seem like his entire team is not being briefed. And of course, for large corporates, take for example, we talked about Apple, we talked about a lot of, even Elon Musk's Tesla, they source a lot of the components of their products from China. This means they will have to pay an extra 125% tariff on anything that comes from China. So it's upended a lot of the business. Also, there are a lot of American businesses who would like to sell their products overseas in Europe and in other parts of Asia. And if there is reciprocal tariffs from those countries, then that business gets upended as well. Also remember that the Americans have a lot of their retirement pension money in their stock market. So if the stock market takes a beating, it makes them really nervous. Let's take a look at how much has been lost, right? So according to Bloomberg, in these 3 days of market loss, which wiped out since the reciprocal tariffs were announced, Thursday, Friday, Monday saw really bad cuts and wiped out $10 trillion of equity value across the globe. Roughly 10% of the global GDP has gotten wiped out. The S&P 500, which is a stock market index in the US that actually tracks publicly traded companies in the US, has suffered its deepest 4 days of loss since its creation in 1950. So obviously, Trump is trying to seem like this is cool negotiating tactics, but it does seem like there was a lot of pressure within his system that he had to eventually yield to. Now, effectively, let's take a look at what's happening with China. Interestingly, Trump was actually praising China, the Chinese President Xi Jinping. He said he's one of the smartest people in the world. He's a smart guy. We'll end up making a very good deal. He's a man who knows exactly what has to be done, and he loves his country. We will get a phone call at some point, and then it's off to the races. So effectively suggesting that China has not called Trump yet. Now remember, Trump has also said repeatedly that all of the countries are trying to call him desperately. They're saying, please sir, let's make a deal, sir. He said, and I quote, they're kissing my ass. But it does seem like China has not made that call, and that is what is, tripping up Trump. What has China been up to in the meantime? China has refused to talk, as we know. It has reached out to other countries outside of the US to actually band together to make the US finally retreat. So it has been China has been speaking to Europe, and they're trying to find a positive message from that. China has also been speaking to a 10-member association of Southeast Asian nations to see if they can actually band together there as well. So China not speaking to the US, but speaking around the US. We know that Japan has been speaking to Canada. So countries are actually finding routes to talk and find to band together to be able to drive a better deal. Now, like we did say, the markets had gone up 10 to 12%, but they have now begun to correct. The US markets have had a very good day. Goldman Sachs has walked back its forecast that the US will enter a recession within the next 12 months. The Indian stock market, like I said, was closed on Thursday because of Mahavir Jayanti, so we have not seen a reaction to any of this. The Chinese yuan has ended at its weakest level in more than 17 years. So China also facing that heat. The question we are asking is, will the pause that Trump has announced actually save the US a recession? Now remember, Goldman Sachs has walked back its prediction, but JP Morgan Chase has not. Now, JP Morgan Chase on Wednesday, before the pause was announced, had predicted a 60% probability that this will result in a recession. Now, Trump's move has calmed some investors, but according to the JP Morgan economic team, it has not changed that prediction. In their report, they've said China-specific tariffs are shocking, and it's being described as the average US rate, so basically 125% on China is going to cause chaos and within trade and domestic fiscal matters, along with a still large losses in the equity markets and a hit to confidence. So it remains difficult to see the US avoiding a recession. This is what JP Morgan has said. The CEO, Jamie Dimon, has said the recession is the most likely outcome. I hear just from everybody now, we're going to cut back a little bit, wait and watch. And this is recessionary talk, is what he has said. Dimon has also warned that defaults will follow if you have rates going up even a little bit. Inflation is sticky, credit spreads are gapping out, which is what they're going to do. You will see more credit problems. So basically what he's saying is, if inflation goes up, then they will have to raise rates in order to manage inflation, which means that people will start defaulting on their loans. So effectively, Trump's trade policies have been unpredictable. It's becoming difficult for the markets or the investors or the economists to predict anything. Goldman Sachs has pulled back its recessionary forecast, but they're not the only one. So for example, Zurich Insurance Group has said, and I'm quoting, "It seems very clear that the smooth long-term uptack for US stocks has been broken, and we're in a new era of heightened volatility and uncertainty." Also, again, Zurich Insurance Group, it seems clear that we cannot. So he said that while Trump's pause has eased recession fears, banks have said they expect a sharp slowdown in economic growth, with consumer and business sentiment likely to be hit. Let's take a quick look now at what's happening with India and how this affects India. Trump has imposed a 26% customized reciprocal on Indian imports. It's now come down to 10% in this pause. We have our government that has tried a lot to broker a deal. The Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson Ranveer Jaiswal on Wednesday said reciprocal tariffs and discussions are ongoing between India and the US. And he said that they are very strong partners, and when it comes to trade relations, economic relations, investment relations, we hope these relations will continue to foster and deepen. This is what a diplomat is supposed to sound like. As far as trade issues are concerned, we are in negotiation for a bilateral trade agreement. Hopefully, we'll be able to address these issues and conclude this particular agreement expeditiously. So the Indian stock market did not react to that uptick, but we'll open tomorrow and we'll take a look at how our stock market reacts to that. But effectively, voices from around the world, from economists and traders, are effectively saying two things. One is that volatility will continue in the markets, and two is that Donald Trump is difficult to predict, so one really doesn't know how this is going to turn. But a recession doesn't seem off the cards for the US, and if the US goes into recession, it's bad news for everyone across the world.